Hello, dear students. Okay, let's start discussing about the concept which have been covered in the chapter number 1. And this book actually argues that the strategies which have been followed by the managers have a direct impact on the superior performance of the company. And let me share with you the objectives of the chapter number 1. Okay, then chapter number 1 is about the strategic leadership and how we can manage the strategy making process for the comparative advantage. The learning objectives are: what is meant by the comparative advantage? What is the role of the strategic leader at the different level within the organization? What are the primary steps in the strategic planning process? And what are the common pitfalls of the planning and how these pitfalls can be avoided? What are the different kind of the cognitive biases that might lead to the poor decision making? And what is the role of the strategy leader play in the strategy making process? Let's look into some basic definitions. What do we mean by the strategy? Strategy has a numerous definition, and the definition of the strategy is still evolving. The main premises of the strategy is that companies are choosing a different kind of actions to achieve their organizational goals. And one of the goal which has been identified in this chapter is to achieve the superior performance and the superior profitability of the company. And I will basically define these terms as superior performance and the superior profitability later on. What do we mean by the strategic leader? The strategic leadership is about how to most effectively manage a company's strategy making process to create a comparative advantage. The strategy making process is the process by which managers select and then implement a set of strategies that aim to achieve a comparative advantage. It has a two component. Strategic leadership is pursuing a different kind of strategies to achieve the higher superior performance for the company, to increase the performance of the company. And that strategy has a two component. One is strategy formulation, which includes the vision, the mission, the strategic goals, values of the company, and selecting and analyzing the internal and the external environment of the company. And strategy implementation is strategy formulation also includes the selection of those strategies at the different level, corporate level, functional level, and the business level. And strategy implementation is putting those strategies into in action. So, which includes strategy implementation include designing, delivering, and supporting products, improving the efficiency and effectiveness of the operation, and designing the organization structure and the control system and the culture of the company. Okay, if you look into the cycle of the strategic leadership, the strategic leadership is mainly concerned with the strategy making process to increase the performance of the company. So thereby increase the value of the enterprise to its owner, its shareholder, and to increase the shareholder value, manager must pursue strategies that increase the profitability of the company and ensure that profit grows. So if you look into this diagram, figure 1.1, a company must be able to outperform its rivals. So it has a comparative advantage. So it can increase their profitability, which is the return on invested capital. I will come back to this formula shortly. And the profit growth, the growth of the profit throughout many years. So if the company effectiveness of the strategy is basically increasing the value for the shareholder, the owner of the companies. And if your strategies are effective, then the companies remain in profit, and their profit also grow gradually in different time period. So that increases the shareholder value. So let's talk about that shareholder value for some time. And when we talk about superior performance means that we are increasing the shareholder value. And the shareholder value refers to return that shareholder earns from purchasing share in a company. And these returns come from two sources. One is a capital appreciation in the value of the company share, and second is a dividend payments. So maximizing shareholder value is the ultimate goal of a profit-making company for two reasons. First, shareholder provide a company with a risk capital that enables manager to buy the resources needed to produce and sell goods and services. Achha, what do we mean by the risk capital? Risk capital is a capital that cannot be recovered if a company fails and goes bankrupt. So the shareholder takes the risk of investing a capital in the company, and superior performance can be achieved if managers are able to select and implement effective and efficient strategies. So superior performance is depending upon that whether the managers are putting up the strategies effectively and efficiently in the company. So that is the job of the managers to um, make the company implement those strategies which make the company profitable. Shareholders are actually the legal owner of the corporation, and their shares therefore represent a claim on the profit generated by the company. Thus, managers have an obligation to invest those profits in ways that maximize their shareholder value. One way of measuring the profitability of the company is by the return that it makes on the capital invested in the enterprise, which is known as the return on the invested capital. It has been mentioned in the book, in the figure, aapke samne. ROIC, that a company earns is defined as its net profit over the capital invested in the firm. That means net profit, the profit after the tax, divided by capital invested. So that is the formula for the return on invested capital that a company earns is defined as its net profit over the capital invested in the firm. The net profit means net income after tax. Capital means the sum of the money invested in the company. That is stockholder equity plus debt owed to creditors. For example, if the shareholders are investing of 1 million and the company is taking a loan of, let's say, 0.5 million from the banks, so 1.5 million is an invested capital in the company. So what is the return on that invested capital? That is the one measure of the profitability. Okay. And so we define profitability is the result of how efficiently and effectively managers use the capital at their disposal to produce goods and services that satisfy customer needs. So profitability is basically effectiveness of those strategies, which that how they are using those capital to produce goods and services which satisfy the customer needs. How can we define the profit growth? Profit growth of a company can be increased by increase in the net profit over time. A company can grow its profit if it sells product in market that are growing rapidly, gains market share from rivals, increase the amount it sells to existing customers, expands overseas or diversifies profitability into new lines of business. So together, profitability and the profit growth are the principal drivers of shareholder value. To both, these are the important profitability and the profit growth. So company is said to have a comparative advantage. Together, let me first talk about profitability and the profit growth. So profitability and the profit growth are the principal drivers of the shareholder value. To both boost profitability and the profit growth over time, manager must formulate and implement those strategies which give the company comparative advantage over their rivals. For example, the comparative advantage of a Apple company, the comparative advantage of the Microsoft company over their rivals for a long period of a time. So that is why their profitability increases and there is a growth in their profit as well. So what shareholder want to see and what manager must try to deliver through strategic leadership is the profitable growth, that is high profitability and sustainable profitable growth. Sustainable profitable growth is that profitable growth which sustains over a period of a time. Now, what do we mean by this word? I have basically explained these terms. Uh, Let me erase these annotations. Okay. So I've already described the word shareholder value, that return that shareholder earn from purchasing share in the company. You can, so that the one way through which these different shareholder become the legal owner of the company. And then the risk capital, equity capital invested with no guarantee that stockholder will recoup their cash and earn a decent return. Then profitability has the two measures. One is the return on invested capital and the result of how effectively and efficiently the capital is used to satisfy the customer need, which I have explained you earlier. I've also explained the word the profit growth to increase the net profit over time achieved by selling products in rapidly growing markets and gaining market share from the rivals and selling more to the existing customers. So there are different ways through which the companies can increase their profit by diversification as well. And they can use different strategies to give their companies a comparative advantage over their rivals, deliver high profitability and sustainable profit growth. Now, what do you mean by the comparative advantage? To maximize shareholder value, manager must formulate and implement strategies that enable their company to outperform their rivals, that give to a comparative advantage. A company is said to have a comparative advantage over its rival when its profitability is greater than the average profitability and profit growth of the other companies competing for the same set of the customers. The higher its profitability relative to the rivals, the greater its comparative advantage will be. A company has a sustained comparative advantage when its strategies enable it to maintain above average profitability for a number of years. So that is the difference between comparative advantage and sustainable comparative advantage, that edge of the company remains for a number of years. So that becomes the sustainable comparative advantage. For instance, you can look into the different kind of technologies employed by the Apple company. You can look into the different kind of smart solutions provided by the Dell company that brought sustainable comparative advantage for those companies. Okay. Now, what do we mean by the business model? So business model is a basic revenue generation model for the company, that how the company are using its resources, capacities, putting strategies into the action and generating a revenue. For example, for instance, if you look into the Dell initial business model is to those sell computers, sell customized computers which meet the needs and the the want of a customer. So that is the basic business model of a Dell company, where they are meeting the customer needs by providing them a customized solutions. The business model is basically, you can say, the mental model, the gestalt. It's a kind of a model which basically conceive that how strategies should work together as a whole to achieve the comparative advantage for the company, to generate revenue stream for the company, and it deal with a lot of things. For example, it deal with the that what kind of a customer are you going to serve, and what are your product offering, how do you differentiate your product offering from your competitors, how can you create a value for the customer, what kind of a products or goods or services will be produced and delivered to the market, and how can the companies using a different strategies to increase their productivity and lowering their cost, and what are their ways through which they're organizing their resources and activities, and how they are achieving a sustainable high profitability and the growth. So business model is a gestalt, is a mental model through which you are achieving the organizational goal and creating a link between strategies and the goals and the revenue streams. So I'm ending my presentation here. In the next presentation, I am going to discuss about the rest of the chapter.